Welcome to part 1 of our lecture on the autonomic nervous system. In part 1, we will discuss an overview of the autonomic nervous system and begin our discussion of pathways, starting with the parasympathetic nervous system. The nervous system can be broken down functionally into subdivisions. These subdivisions are motor and sensory. Each of these subdivisions can be further broken down. Motor can be broken down into voluntary and autonomic motor, and sensory can be broken down into somatosensory, visceral sensory, and special sensory. The autonomic nervous system is then one of our subdivisions of the motor system. It differs from voluntary motor, however, whereas voluntary motor innervates skeletal muscle, autonomic motor innervates cardiac muscle and smooth muscle. Also, while the voluntary motor system has one motor neuron that connects the central nervous system to the target muscle, the autonomic nervous system has a two-neuron pathway. Here we can see representations of the two subdivisions of the motor system. In voluntary motor, we have a single neuron whose cell body is in the central nervous system and goes into the peripheral nervous system to innervate the skeletal muscle. In the autonomic nervous system, we have one neuron whose cell body is in the central nervous system, but when it enters the peripheral nervous system, it synapses on a second neuron, and it is the second neuron that is going to innervate the smooth or cardiac muscle. The autonomic nervous system pathway then consists of two motor neurons between the central nervous system and our target organ. The two neurons are connected by a synapse. The cell body for the second neuron is located in a ganglion. Therefore, this is where the synapse is going to occur. You might recall a ganglion is a collection of neuron cell bodies located outside of the central nervous system. And you're already familiar with the dorsal root ganglion. But this is not a dorsal root ganglion. We have different autonomic ganglia in the peripheral nervous system, and their locations and names will differ. We'll go through just a few of these when we're going through our pathways. The first neuron, whose cell body is in the central nervous system, is known as the preganglionic or presynaptic neuron. If it is a sympathetic neuron, the cell body will be located in the lateral horn of the spinal cord, somewhere between T1 and L2 or L3. If it is a parasympathetic neuron, its cell body will either be in the brainstem or will be in a region of the sacral spinal cord that is similar to the lateral horn, but there is no true lateral horn outside of the thoracic levels. The postganglionic neuron is also known as the postsynaptic neuron. So this is the second neuron in our pathway. Its cell body, again, will be in that autonomic ganglion where our synapse is taking place. Here is a schematic then of our preganglionic and postganglionic neurons. Our preganglionic neuron has its cell body in the central nervous system, somewhere in the brainstem or spinal cord. The postganglionic neuron has its cell body in an autonomic ganglion in the peripheral nervous system, and then it is going to synapse and innervate directly the smooth or cardiac muscle. You might recall from your prior anatomy and physiology courses that the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight system. It is also known as the thoracolumbar system because the location of the preganglionic cell bodies in the thoracic and upper lumbar spinal cord. In general, we tend to think of the sympathetic nervous system as being an emergency response system. The parasympathetic system, on the other hand, is involved with homeostasis, bringing us back to and keeping us in a stable internal environment. It is known as the craniosacral system because the cell bodies of our preganglionic neurons are located in the brainstem within the cranium and in the sacral spinal cord. It is commonly referred to as the rest and digest system or the feed and breed system. Now let's talk about specific pathways, starting with the parasympathetic nervous system. The preganglionic cell bodies are located in either the brainstem or the spinal cord at S2 through S4. In the brainstem, the preganglionic neurons run in cranial nerve 3 oculomotor, cranial nerve 7 facial, and cranial nerve 9 glossopharyngeal to get to the smooth muscle of the visceral organs and glands in the face and region, such as our tear glands and our salivary glands. Cranial nerve 10 vagus carries preganglionic neurons to target organs in the region of the throat, viscera within the thorax, and viscera within the abdomen. Within the abdomen, the vagus nerve innervates the majority of the GI system, including the stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestine through the transverse colon. It would also innervate the smooth muscle of all of the ducts within the GI system, such as the ducts from the pancreas and from the liver. The preganglionic neurons that are located in the spinal cord in the gray matter of sacral 2 through sacral 4 levels are going to innervate the inferior aspect of the GI tract, the descending colon and sigmoid colon and rectum, as well as pelvic structures, such as our urogenital system. The postganglionic neuron cell bodies within the parasympathetic nervous system are located in ganglia known as intrinsic ganglia. They're also sometimes called terminal ganglia because they're at the termination of the pathway. They are located either within the wall of the target organ itself or very close to it. For the GI system, these ganglia can also be known as enteric ganglia. I will try to consistently use the term intrinsic ganglion. In the parasympathetic nervous system, we have a long preganglionic axon and a short postganglionic axon. Because our preganglionic neuron originates in the central nervous system and has to get all the way to the target, whereas the postganglionic neuron, the ganglion is located very close to or actually on the target itself, so it only has a very short distance to go. There is roughly a 1-to-2 ratio between preganglionic and postganglionic neurons. So each preganglionic neuron synapses on roughly 2 postganglionic neurons. This means you can get a fairly specific event. The more activation you want, the more preganglionic axons you activate. But if I just want one small area to have its effect, I can do that by stimulating just a few preganglionic neurons. The preganglionic axons that have their cell bodies in the sacral spinal cord have their axons running in what is known as the pelvic splanchnic nerves. So we now know the 5 nerves of the parasympathetic nervous system. Cranial nerve 3 oculomotor, cranial nerve 7 facial, cranial nerve 9 glossopharyngeal, cranial nerve 10 vagus, and the pelvic splanchnic nerve. Here's a picture then of our 5 nerves carrying parasympathetic neurons. Again, cranial nerve 3 oculomotor, cranial nerve 7 facial, cranial nerve 9 glossopharyngeal, and cranial nerve 10 vagus all originating in the brainstem and carrying those preganglionic neurons to a intrinsic ganglion, which is going to be close to its target. It's going to synapse on the postganglionic neuron, which will actually innervate the muscle of that target. And we can see a long preganglionic with a short postganglionic. The pelvic splanchnic nerve has neurons whose cell bodies are in the S2 through S4 levels of the spinal cord. Again, we have a long preganglionic and a short postganglionic, synapsing on intrinsic ganglia close to the target or within the wall of the target. Here is another representation of the parasympathetic nerve pathway with a little bit more detail. So originating in the brainstem, we have the preganglionic neurons that are traveling in cranial nerve 3 oculomotor, 7 facial, 9 glossopharyngeal, or 10 vagus, synapsing on the postganglionic neurons in the intrinsic ganglion, which is close to or within the wall of our target. The other location for preganglionic neurons would be in the sacrospinal cord at S2 through S4. These neurons are in the gray matter of the spinal cord, but at this level we do not have a lateral horn. So it will just say the gray matter of the spinal cord at S2 through S4. The neurons then travel through the ventral root into the spinal nerve into a ventral ramus in order to get out from the vertebral column. Once they get outside the vertebral column, they leave the ventral rami and travel in the pelvic splanchnic nerve to the intrinsic ganglion on or near the target organ, where they then synapse on the postganglionic neuron. So that's the end of our overview of the ANS and our discussion of the pathways of the parasympathetic nervous system. In part 2, we will begin our discussion of the pathways of the sympathetic nervous system.